Gut. So, lassen. Good, we are live. Hi, Katherine.
Hi, Pascal.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm looking outside and it's rainy, which is unusual because normally I'm sitting where the sun is.
So, what's better, rainy or sun?
Oh, it's a very philosophical question to start with. A good mix is good.
Good mix. I like rain. I mean, not like 4 weeks, but I like a good summer rain. Yeah,
We're
it's
in
for
Sweden, so I'm not sure I can call this a summer rain, but I see what you mean.
ah, okay. No, then what I do is with my girls, we say we eat the rain. We like open our mouth to eat the rain. Ah. Good. Well, good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, what's going on your side since we met last time? Summer season, how about holiday?
Summer season supposedly slowing down, and we changed the continent, so that's always takes a while to adapt. So we're in the Swedish countryside where internet is not as stable as it could be. So let's see whether this holds, but all fine. Enjoying the slightly slower pace so far and seeing family, which is nice.
So
And
Sweden not so technology advanced as I might think it seen from Switzerland, or
maybe not all sides, so
not all sides.
in Sweden. What about you? How is life in Switzerland right now?
Um, well, I think everything's fine. I this business slowed down. I can feel it a lot with the school holiday that business slows down. Um, which is a good thing because we have 3 weeks of holiday. I mean, for us, for the parents, but like I don't know how many, 8, 7 or 8 or something for the kids. So we have we
Yeah.
have to deal with this. It's good to be slow down a bit and we can do little activities. And I have one daughter, she did a swimming class, and the other one is in the basketball camp, also this type of things. And yeah, I can do since it's a bit more quiet. I can like do the stuff I wanted to do for weeks or months already for my business. Small things that are not extreme priority, but still nice to do.
Mm.
So I like this quiet summer period with less phone calls and less emails.
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
then we go to Morocco for a couple of days for 2.5 weeks. A
Nice.
little bit
Sounds
of
good.
family, a little bit of swimming, Atlantic, and so on. Yeah. Reading, reading at the beach, and so on.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah, so we wanted to start with just short information. Maybe I think I can even share my screen for those who watch. And then, of course, we also commented. So I thought might be interesting to share it here since that's the community, mediation community, especially with more international touch. So I came up with this job that I found on LinkedIn, which is African Union roster of mediation and thematic technical experts. So I think everybody can go and check it out for details. Just search for that term, African Union roster of mediation thematic technical expert. The website is a bit complicated, maybe it's payco.org, and so yeah. But I think by searching for it, otherwise drop a line to me and I will send it. It's still open for a week, so you have to hurry up. It's until the 18th of July. And they're looking for a couple of technical experts, climate change, conflict expert, national dialogue, social inclusion, and so on, transitional justice, security expert, all somehow linked to mediation, as I understood it. So looks quite interesting. And then another one I came across, I received this from
Pascal, just to maybe add for the African Union roster, it's probably more directed towards candidates from the global south. I would think so. Just to add that. It doesn't specify
that's
necessarily, but I think you need to have quite specific expertise from the region as well.
yeah, or
And
even
probably
being
preferably, locally, like local experts too.
I guess. I think they're not
Yeah.
not sure if they mentioned it, but I think that's very well possible. Yeah.
Mm.
Perfect. And the other one is I got it from from a union mediators association I'm a member of. And I don't really understand exactly what it is. So I got it from a good source, from a trustworthy source. And there's more information apparently on aminst.com/brochmed. But what I saw here, I just read this part. So I couldn't find out which field, but it's like overseas, well, overseas depending on where you're based, but it's a long-term 3 to 4 months mandate, and so with local hotel and everything taken care of. Project duration 3 to 4 months on average, sometimes more. And projects will be assigned as they arise. Work will be project based. And while it will continue once a project begins, there may be gaps between the projects. So it looks a little bit like an interesting thing, but you cannot really have a job besides that. It looks like a kind of a part-time job, but it's well paid, I find. Like it's 2,500 to $3,500 a week. So if you're on a 16-week project, it's $48,000 for 1/3 of a year, as they say. Travel and living expenses and so covered. So yeah, I think somebody who might be interested in such a job, like a roster, long-term roster mandate. So looks interesting, but I mean, for me personally, impossible with family and work and so on. But why not? And we also found now another one about the deputy executive director in Berlin at the Berkow Foundation, which is a very renowned organization in the field. Yeah, we just came across, so without going too much into details, but it's still open until the 3rd of September. And that's definitely a very nice, I guess, also a bit challenging job as deputy director of Berkow. A lot of really good international projects, a lot of peace building, peace mediation. Yeah, there's a little bit something going on, all despite all the bad news we might have from the field these recent times. But there's still some jobs around. Good. So we just thought that might be interesting to share maybe for our community.
And if you want to, those of you who listen now or who look at this later, if you want to give us a feedback on whether you find this useful to have as a starter in general, that we give a quick overview of the open positions out there. If you find that interesting, please let us know so that we get a sense of whether we can continue doing that or whether that's a waste of time for some of you. Thanks.
Exactly. Thanks, Katherine. Perfect. So today we talk about the beyond bias, navigating gender and conflict resolution. How do we want to structure this, Katherine?
Thanks, Pascal. Well, you probably know that this is a topic that is quite dear to me, and I've worked on it on different angles for a while. We thought maybe I should start like this. We thought specifically about the distinction between gender and the inclusion of women, because I think we've also seen that when we work around peace mediation, sort of the inclusion of women and the lack of inclusion is often a topic, and it's far from being resolved, as we know. But in this episode, we really want to focus more on gender bias, and in particular, the more subtle ways in how bias can influence mediation processes and outcomes. And so what we thought about is we would structure it this way, to look at first very briefly, just look at what we mean with gender, what gender means, why it matters in the process, in the mediation process, why we need to be aware of the bias, of gender bias in particular, and then maybe also just very briefly on tools and ways how to spot biases and how to debunk them as well, which is useful, I think. And maybe, so to start with, looking at what gender is, Pascal, just when we started to talk about the episode right now, right? We both said like there's always a bit of a vague feeling around what is gender, what is sex. Is that from your experience the case?
Absolutely, I can confirm. What is women inclusion? It's
Mm.
all a bit different things, and I have to admit to my shame that it's a topic that I don't master a lot. I mean, of course, working in international development, I had the question very often. I've never really developed particular skills, a little bit, or I had to, I had to argue for project proposals and so on. But I always found it a bit also challenging, and I think it was never so really clear. Not even the donors who actually brought up the topic sometimes apparently had a clear idea, because I, with my very little expertise, drafted something and apparently it was okay. But I found later on, I found out that some others criticized and said, no, no, this is women inclusion, this is not gender, and so on.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so I'm happy to have you here as an expert, definitely more expert than I am. But I also, when we discussed and prepared, I figured out that this comes up really often, also in micro level situations where you have women and
Mm.
men, and
Mm.
sometimes this topic is more concerned, sometimes not. Even if it's not concerned, you might have special dynamics ongoing.
Mm.
And yeah, it will be interesting
Definitely.
to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this.
Yeah, I find it really interesting in particular also. I mean, you have only girls. I have a son and two girls. And I
Mhm.
love to speak about it at home as well, because it's really so interesting to see what the children also pick up at school and bring home. So I mean, just to maybe make this clear, and I think probably most of the people listening to this will know it. It's really that gender, when we refer to gender, it's about the socially constructed roles and behaviors and attitudes and things that are being learned, that change over time, that are dynamic and that are not set in stone, that are not physical or physiological. So this is, I think, really important to keep in mind when we refer to sex. It's more the physical attributes, and gender is really, when we talk about gender biases, it's the ideas we connect with a certain gender. When we talk about women, we have certain ideas, and when we talk about men, and having said that, I think all too often still gender is a binary concept. And I think it's good that that has changed in the past years, that it is non-binary, and that we realize there isn't just sort of there aren't female attributes and male attributes, but there are transgender roles and identities that we have to acknowledge. And I think also realizing that thinking in a binary way is always very limiting. So it's really important, I think, to keep that in mind. And maybe just lastly, because I think it also matters quite a bit, is the notion of intersectionality, meaning that, yes, so gender is a factor, but it's not the only one. So a factor in identities, what's important, what matters in how we see each other is age, is ethnic background, is language, is where we grow up, whether it's urban, whether it's rural. So I think it's also important to note that it's not because I'm a woman and have grown up in a city in a given place, I experience exactly the same as a woman
Mm.
growing up in a rural space. I think it's so to keep other factors in mind as well is really,
Yeah.
really important when we discuss gender biases and gender roles.
Yeah. So to put it simply, that would mean sex is given, although today with non-binarity and so on, this can be discussed, but like the basic concept, sex is given
Mm.
and gender is constructed. It's our ideas that we have built on with our socialization and so on.
Yeah.
So where
I
would you
think it's
put?
probably not as easy as that in the meantime anymore, as we also, I think, challenge sex and say, well, we want to maybe change our sex, and we're not given it, and then we are just
Mhm.
a girl because we have, the sexual organ of a girl. So I think it also changes, but I think if you want to try and be clear, definitely. I think it's good to remember that, as you said, gender is learned, gender roles are learned, and they also change over time
Yeah.
and yeah. What was it?
I have this really often the thinking with for my kids, for my girls, when the discussion, on TV or wherever you hear that, I don't know, any given statement or like I don't know, can't recall it exactly, but like women have less salary, even if a statistical fact.
Mm,
And I think I don't want my girls to hear that. Because if they hear that, given like such a fact or like just a statement somewhere, be it on the news or whatever, like they will integrate it. I don't want them to
mm,
integrate it. No,
yeah.
but you cannot escape it. Or I can give you a really an example. I was really shocked from the federal authorities. I think it doesn't exist anymore. It was called Salarium, which is statistical data on salaries. You can check your region, your canton, the language,
Mm,
your education, the number of years you have, the number of years experience you have, and so on, and men or women. And if you have exactly the same criteria, but you change men or women, the salary changes. It drops
mm,
for women. And once I checked this with my wife, and she was looking a bit on the market and maybe a new job and so on, and she compared and she wanted to say, what can I ask from a salary? And I said it on men, and then we had all her criteria and so on, and then we switched to women, and she said, "Oh, but I can ask for less salary, you know." And this thing is statistically,
mm.
I guess, true,
Yeah,
but
a
how
gender pay
can
gap.
yeah, but how can the authorities promote this, You
Mm,
do an average or keep it away, or I don't know what to do, but if you do that, and it happened exactly with, I'm sorry for my wife if she hears that, talk about personal things, but I think it's okay. She said, yo, but see, I can ask
mm.
for less salary. I said, no, don't put this in your mind. Don't, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think about, I mean, let me not go into the details of Swiss policies because, as you know, it's the Swiss government is maybe not sort of the best in promoting gender equality. Was it 1994 that one of the last cantons gave women the right to vote? We used to have that example,
91.
I think, in our training. So, no, but I
And
hear you.
91, 91.
91? Okay.
Not much better, but
Not much better. Um,
71, 71 on federal level, 91 the last canton. But it's worse than that, if I can maybe conclude the story, is because 91, if I'm not completely wrong, but I think that's true, there was a votation locally, and they voted not to give the
women
salary
do it. Yeah. Yeah.
equity. And upon that, the federal tribunal interfered and said, no, no, you cannot vote this. This is against the constitution. No,
Yeah.
but
No, but
let's.
I mean, on your point that we can't escape, and I think this is why it's so important to understand that it is learned and that we are that is society also, right? That has a certain view and promotes certain ideals in a way. And it's really hard to shield your children,
Mm,
be it a boy or a girl, from some of these social norms because this is what they are. This is how they perceive it. It's peers, it's friends, it's publicities that you see that reflect a certain
mm,
image of
mm,
a boy or a girl or a man or a woman, and it's extremely hard to keep your mind open, I think, growing up and say, well, this is not how I identify. I think as a boy, I want to wear a pink
mm,
skirt if just because I feel like it and I don't give a damn what the
mm,
others think, right? So I think we really underestimate how much it influences growing up, and you can't really shield your children also away from it. So it's an important discussion, I think, to have at home
mm,
as well regularly
mm,
on what it means.
mm,
Um, but so just to say, I think in any kind of setting, it influences how we perceive each other. So when we look at mediation, we talked about, so how does it actually matter? How does gender matter in a mediation setting? And there's three different points, I would say. First of all, it matters for the conflict parties. So it matters, of course, whether you're a man or a woman as a conflict party. It matters then how you perceive each other, how you communicate with each other. It matters as an issue because you would have a classical issue in an international mediation setting is that when you resolve conflict is, of course, for instance, sexual and gender-based violence. So that is a classical issue that needs to be resolved that it's a gender issue at its core, really. And I think even if you take it on a very local, on a private level, you probably have had that in your experience as well, Pascal, are gender-based discriminations or sexual harassment issues. So clearly gender plays a role there too. And then lastly, as a mediator as well, right? Whether what the baggage we bring, the roles we play, what we have learned, how we identify. And I think we talk about this a little bit later, is then also how to be able to step away from it and not let this impact sort of the outcome of the mediation in itself.
So the parties, the
Yeah.
issue, the mediator.
Yes.
Those are
That's
the
how I would
three.
summarize it, right? So it basically means it has really an impact on all of these three. And then you could even add another layer and say the process in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, issues and process maybe can be, yeah.
Yeah.
Where does it have the highest impact, do you think? If
Hmm.
it makes sense
Yeah, yeah.
of issue.
I think it's hard to say that generally. I think it depends really on, for instance, if you work in an international peace mediation and sexual and gender-based violence is really a key point, then clearly, it has a huge, huge impact. And then this aspect, the fact that it touches on the issue, has a huge impact on the parties and how you manage the parties. And for instance, it also means the question, who has to be around the table then, right? So if you discuss
Who
conflict,
defines
sexual
the issue?
violence, who is around the table? And so it's also interlinked in a way, of course. What's your experience? Have you encountered it mostly with the parties as something that comes up, gender comes up, or is it something you've come across as an issue in your experience now?
Well, I think parties and issues are connected in that sense that if you have the right parties at the table, the right issues will come up.
Yeah.
I've seen this in a case in Northern Africa on it's more societal mediation group or maybe tribal groups, and so where the women brought up really different topics, like more topics on, I don't know, school and health, water quality, this type of things, which is again maybe already, not stereotype, but yeah, more the role of the person who cares, which is again they're in their role, in their gender role, possibly. But that's what I observed. And so if we had not had the women at the table, we wouldn't have had these topics, clearly. So
Yeah.
I think the specific parties bring up specific topics and issues. So
But it's
this,
interesting that you say that, because I think also, as you said, it sometimes then also becomes a stereotype again, because we have the tendency, and I think on an international level, to equate women at the table with being sort of gender sensitive or having typical gender issues that we then, or we meaning the international community, then think are health, our education,
yeah,
sort of are the soft issues, right? So it
yeah.
is then indeed becomes a bit of a stereotype, but it's also important to see that you have made the experience. Um,
But that's exactly, I think, the key question that at least for me, I never really answered it. So if it's not simply the number of, women, men, and the equal representation and so on, what is it then? I mean, how do you bring in the gender perspective? Is it the way you structure the process? Is it the way you ask the questions, the way you facilitate what is it?
yeah. But I think having the right number of men and women is definitely one aspect. And it's super important. But I think also what the term that has been coined in the recent years is the qualitative participation,
Yeah.
women, for instance.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, because just having women, somehow a quota of women part doesn't really mean they can actually contribute. And maybe just to actually, one example I found really eye-opening from quite a while ago. I was working with the with some Syrian women's civil society groups, who were involved in, at the time, at the dialogue process in Syria. So that's about almost 10 years now ago. And I remember speaking to some of the women, and they really noted that there was a group, like a very diverse group of women selected to be part in this dialogue commission that would be able to feed into the actual consultation process and into the peace negotiations that were going on. But they were apart from it. But there was really, like, the group of women that were selected was highly, highly diverse, coming
Mhm.
from very different political backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, you name it. And the reason why this was done, what the women felt, was they said, just the organizers of the conversation believe women are peace doves. So no matter what our background is, where we come from, but we can be actually together in one forum and
Yeah.
discuss peacefully how we contribute. While for the conflicting parties, it's very clear they're conflicting parties, and they, need help to be able to talk to each other. And that was also really interesting. It's this idea that, yeah, women are by nature more empathetic. They are the caretakers. And yes, I mean, they are often the caretakers, but is this natural or is this learned? Or is it both, right?
Mhm. But how do you do if in a society uh, a big majority is socialized in a certain way that maybe women are the caretaker, are more, and how do you go in there? I mean, our objective, well, I don't know, we can discuss it, but I think as a mediator, being neutral and impartial, somehow I would say our objective is not to go in value based and
Mm,
bring a
mm,
certain you know I don't know, gender equality. I think we have to do it in the process. We have to do it in the participation for sure. And you also have to ask questions if there is a strange statement, about the other sex or gender. Then I think you have to take it up. You have to say why you're saying this. What's behind your words, or the other party. How do you receive this? I think we have to take it up. But because I had also the situation once where, yeah, it was many men involved, and then we said, but where are the women? I mean,
mm,
and for them, I mean, there were a few women involved, but like somehow it was really difficult to try to convince them to, yeah, to take this women participation more seriously, and because for them it was just in their conception it was not necessary. So
mm,
how far can we come with a value-based, almost an objective of not of an outcome, but of, I don't know
mm.
if you see the question.
Yeah, I totally see the question. I think, well, to some extent, and quite a big extent, it's not only value-based because it's normative as well. If we talk about from an
Sure,
international perspective, right? Because we're adhering to
sure.
the
Yeah.
to international law. And so I think a human rights-based approach means we treat men and women equally. However, having said that, it's also clear that, in particular, as an outsider, as a third party, it's really hard to come in and try to impose an agenda. So it has to be done in a way that is it's driven, I think, by the local process as well. And then it's a very fine line, is in how much do you push for it, and in how much do you also accept things as they are. But I think you can always argue sort of in line with a normative framework, because value-based clearly is a tricky one. But I guess what works most is if you also, if it's clear that if you bring different perspectives in, and different perspectives means also men and women, but again, it means more than men and women. It means different ages, different age groups,
Mm.
because again, there's not a heterogeneous group of sorry, a homogeneous group of women or a homogeneous group of men,
No,
right?
definitely not. Yeah.
So yeah, but it's a tricky
But
question.
but that comes back to the process because now I remember also how we have done this is that we have because first idea was to group the stakeholders and to have them in a kind of a conference setting, gathering setting, and women didn't show up.
Hmm.
So we chose then another approach, which was actually the facilitators went to see them at home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then and again, I'm saying we actually uh, confirming the fact that they don't want to leave home, they don't want to mix in a public space, and somehow by doing this effort, we're confirming their socialization, which we think maybe is,
Hmm.
let's
Yeah,
say, questionable, but
yeah,
it's the only way to
yeah.
do it.
Yeah, or you could, I remember like in DCAF at the time when working with the security sector and trying to bring more women into consultations, into local consultations, we would also think about offering childcare
Mhm.
at that time when a given
Exactly.
meeting was organized. I think there's ways of helping to sort of not reconfirm necessary sort of social norms. But I think it's always, again, a fine line because you also don't want to put women out in the cold, so to say, and make
Uh,
them, vulnerable for retribution because they participated, in a meeting that maybe they should not have participated in, and they get really into trouble. Um,
mhm.
by the men in the family. So yeah, we also it's do no harm as a principle too. So it's a tough one. But this is, I think, again, like the participation of women. This is why I think it's so important to look beyond numbers. And as you said, and also say, well, I mean, if it is it just enough if we have women, or what is actually needed? And again, and I think it's important, and I said that earlier, is one aspect is the number of women. The second one is how they can actually make an impact. And the third is also not to assume that because women are around the table, gender issues and having like a gender sensitive process, we can tick the box.
Uh,
Because it doesn't mean like a woman is not per se a gender expert.
mm,
So
definitely.
it needs to be, yeah, I think it needs a gender expert that helps the process also to be
Mm,
gender responsive,
mm,
for
mm,
sure. Yeah.
mm. So
Mhm.
uh, I want to switch to the third dimension, the mediator. Did you
Yeah.
want to add something before that?
No, no, no. Good.
Okay.
Switch to the mediator.
And I wanted to make a statement and see what you think about this. So we have discussed now many things that you have to care about the process, the design, and so on, all these type of things. Um, and this is particularly true for group facilitation, group mediation on a broader scale. Now, let's think on a micro scale. Mediation with two parties, men and women, and that as a mediator, either male or female, but that in the way we work, without being an expert, without being a gender expert, and so on, but you anyway take up the needs, you take up the dynamics, you take up the feelings.
Mm,
So my idea, and at least so far, maybe you correct my idea, is a bit like for the intercultural issue. I think now, apart from the fact that maybe you have to a specific reading if you're from a specific culture and you know that reading is different and so on, but admitting all this is given, but that if you do the job right as a mediator and you go down to the level of the needs and you take into account the feelings and all the things,
mm.
are you automatically integrating all the needed dimensions of gender and inclusion and all we discussed, or is it the wrong person?
No, I think it's a super important question, and I think to me it ties actually into the third part of what we wanted to talk about is like, why do we actually need to be aware of gender bias as a mediator? Because I think you're totally right. I think a mediator who is able to be really coming into a situation and to be absolutely attuned to what's going on in the moment, um, without bringing his or her own expectations, values, beliefs into the meeting. A mediator that has that capacity to come in and be very present would hopefully be not gender biased. But having said that, I think bias in itself, and not only gender bias, but any kind of bias, I find it super interesting, actually, not only from a mediation perspective, but also to understand more how biases work and that the human brain and humans as such are really prone to work with biases. This is how
Mhm.
the brain works. And for many, many centuries, there was a reason why it works like this. And there's nothing bad inherently in it, I think. So this is why we have to be aware of it. But I think even though one can be quite self-aware, it's still you still find yourself all of a sudden um, upon reflection, realizing that you just like it happens to me that I say something to my son or say something to my daughters, and in hindsight, I feel, oh, that was slightly gender biased what I just said. So I think
Mhm.
it's really, really important to go a bit deeper into understanding what the gender biases are, what some of the stereotypes are. And then I think as a good mediator, and this comes with the years of experience, is also that you are able to be quite that you do an introspection after each mediation, and that helps you also preparing then going into another setting and spotting then maybe some of the reactions that you initially have and you spot them before you basically go maybe into a certain direction that you don't want to go, actually.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, so you're focusing on the introspection afterwards, and but if I got you right, you rather confirming my thesis, isn't it? So that but you have biases, you're saying. I think that's true, and we cannot remove the biases. I think you
Yeah.
can be more or less aware of it,
Yeah.
and with introspection and introvision or whatever, you can maybe
Yeah.
get a deeper understanding. That's also a little bit how, yes, you said it. That's how humans work, and our brain wants to, you know,
It's also
consume
about
less.
categorizing, right? Making information more easily accessible
Exactly,
and digestible.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
save
Yeah.
energy and put
Yeah.
everything in some small
Different
spots
boxes.
and know where the
Yeah. Yeah.
boxes
Yeah.
are.
But maybe just to add one thing, Pascal, because I think what in some circumstances can really help is to have a mixed team.
Mm,
So, in instances where you feel it could be tricky to have a woman, or it could be tricky to have a man, to also make sure, and sort of on an international level, I think this is often an ideal case. And I think in some mediation teams, you would have like the head of the team would be a male and the deputy would be a female. Um, but that's often probably the ideal scenario. So I remember one of my very early mediations was a workplace mediation, and it was a young man and a young woman that had an issue at work, and there wasn't a history of a relationship or anything, but there was a history of mutual attraction, and I think bringing in then a male and a female mediator can also help to spot some dynamics, for instance.
yeah,
And then you actually you really balance each other, I think, as mediators as well. So I think in addition to being, as you say, being very culturally aware, being extremely present, and going in without your own expectations, etc. I think in addition, there's other ways of assuring that you bring in different perspectives also into the process.
yeah. And I think this is particularly true in this type of cases. Sometimes I have situations of sexual harassment
Yeah.
in mediation, whereas also there I always ask the question, given the topic, I'm a man, would you prefer a co-mediation or maybe a female mediator? And I think that is particularly important. I also had a couple of times the case where actually the women told me, I picked you as a mediator, as a man, because it was between
Mm.
men and women, because he would never listen to a woman,
Hmm.
which is already shocking as a situation. But still,
Yeah,
so the ladies took this as a, I don't know, tactical step or I don't know,
yeah,
but they thought, and I think I can in some cases confirm that probably this was true, that the man would rather listen to another man than to a woman. So that's why they picked a male female mediator.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's a valid point. And then we also, in other instances, in particular, when you talk about sexual and gender-based violence, and you have also groups in the room that have where family members have been victimized, etc., it can be really difficult to have a male mediator as well. So it has really both aspects, and I think it shows it's a great example, because it shows also that there isn't one size fits all, but that you have to be extremely attuned to what the parties need,
Yeah,
um, and how you can really support the process best.
yeah, yeah, and
One
always,
one thing I thought about, going back to this, why is it important
yeah,
that we're aware of biases, is also that in the worst case, if we're not, it can really lead to unjust outcomes in a way.
mhm,
And just to maybe swap it around, I was thinking about you, like when preparing the session a bit in terms of when you go into private mediation more again and into family mediation and into child custody settings, for instance. So if you were a mediator that has very strong gender biases, you would go into a child custody discussion, and your basic assumption that you would not be quite aware of, because it's a bias, so we're not aware of it necessarily, would be that, yeah, the woman is the main caretaker. And it's hard then to take a step back and to come in and really see both sides and hear both sides in what they want and what they can do, etc. So I think it also is because we often think about how maybe the women's point of view is not properly, taken into account. There is definitely another side to it as well, where
mhm,
um, there's biases around what we expect from men and how we see them and how they communicate and how they have to be. And in particular, looking at child custody cases, I can imagine that there's also sometimes
yeah,
moments in a mediation where a mediator thinks that, yeah, can he actually really assume like 100% of the custody, or is that, shouldn't that be the mom?
yeah. Well, I think personally, but that's some maybe also with the experience. And so that's something for me personally. I think I can really get out of my biases on that. I can maybe, I can feel it. I become aware of maybe during discussions, that, oh, be careful, biases and so on.
Mm,
But I would be quite sure that this does not have an impact on the result in that sense that, yeah, I completely take the needs of the parties, and for me,
mm,
there is
yeah,
no, how can I say, no gender, no sex. Is what do they want?
yeah,
What are their needs? What are their solutions they want? And whether it's the wife who brings the full salary and man who takes 100% custody or the other way around. I mean, what is true that I can really observe this, like at least in Switzerland, it's still often the classical model where the women
mm,
stopped working or reduced the workload and men had the main salary. This is unfortunately, and it's a problem, especially in divorce situations.
mm, yeah.
Um, that there are a couple of studies that women are much worse off after divorce, financially speaking, than the
Yeah,
men.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this you can balance, and yeah, there is also the law that gives us some framework. You cannot
Mm,
completely do what the
mm,
parties want. So,
mm,
but
mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Maybe just sort of as I'm also looking at the time,
yeah,
we're about 45 minutes. What I thought was really important to mention, as well on this point is that one reason why we need to be aware of it is also that so if imbalances happen, it's about sort of an individual outcome that is unfair, which is really one aspect that that is bad and that we don't want in a conflict resolution process. But the second aspect is that it can undermine conflict resolution processes in itself if gender biases have an impact. Can undermine the trust of the parties in it as well. But I think the key, really the worst effect it can have is that it also perpetuates the imbalances, systemic imbalances that are in place. And it brings us back to what you talked about, Pascal, like when you gave the example of the inadequate pay for women compared to men for the same job. This is a systemic discrimination and a systemic, run by a government. So if we sort of in our mediation process, if we perpetuate gender inequalities, it ultimately also has an impact on, I think, on a systemic level. So I think we also have to keep that in mind in the end.
That's very true. Very true. So what's the main take-home note? I would say maybe from my side, be aware of the biases.
Yeah, be aware of the biases for sure. And I think what you said, which is really good mediation practice, is being very, very present. I think also really helps us not having biases, right, in the moment, but just really, really feeling who's in the room, what the needs are, and taking the people as you really perceive them and not in terms of any roles.
Good. So are you open to have any feedback? I think our listeners can find us on most easy, maybe LinkedIn. So if you have questions or feedbacks or whatsoever, write us. And we also have our page on LinkedIn where you can subscribe and then, be announced of our new upcoming topics. And what else now? Holiday.
Holiday, yes. We will see when we meet next.
Exactly. And we'll let you know on LinkedIn mainly. And have a good time in Sweden.
Yeah, thank you. And you too in Morocco and